Hello, so today we're going to be going over the best comms for patch 15.4b. So if you didn't know, yesterday there was a B patch to the game which nerfed a lot of the reroll comms. So the landscape of the game has changed a little bit. 4-cost comms are a little bit more popular and some of the popular reroll lines aren't as popular anymore. Before we get into it though, if you like my content, make sure to like and subscribe. I'm doing daily TFT guides as well as update content like this where I go over patches and talk about what I think are better comps to play on the current patch. If you want to stay up to date, make sure to like and subscribe. Additionally, I have a gaming VOD channel. If we reach 1,000 subscribers on this channel, then I'll do an RP giveaway. So if you want to see gameplay, you can also check out this channel as well. But anyways, let's get straight into it. I think I'm going to restructure it. Usually I go through 3 or 4 reroll comps and non-reroll comps. I'm going to start with the rerolls this time around because I think that's a big point of contention. So first, reroll comp that I would like to talk about is Soul Fighter, specifically playing around Viego reroll. So Viego reroll is something that was pretty popular last patch, but it was a little bit more niche because it was a little bit harder to chew through front lines. But basically, it plays around Viego being really strong and having really good scaling with attack speed and AP. Basically, Viego has a passive where he does extra magic damage on all of his attacks. And additionally, it has like this active where it's threefold. It has a little bit of a stun, but it scales really well with magic damage. Typically, when you're playing this, you play it as a level 7 reroll comp. I've seen people also sometimes just pick up Udyr 3 along the way, but as soon as you can find 8 Soul Fighter, you can play 8 Soul Fighter, you can level to 8, and then eventually if you make it to high cap level 9, you get Duelist active for the Viego and 8 Soul Fighter active for the rest of your board. A lot of times you play this kind of like from a good Soul Fighter spot as well. Sometimes people reroll for Viego on level 8 for that reason, and they'll try and dual carry Viego and Samira and play it like an 8 Soul Fighter spot. However, typically when you're playing around Viego, you want to build him with attack speed, usually crit, just because he has decent amounts of base stats from Soul Fighter, so you can build him with crit, and he does a lot of damage per hit, and his ult also can crit, which is nice. And then last item, usually to keep him safe, usually go like an Edge of Night, and this is like a typical Viego build so that he doesn't get completely like destroyed. When you're playing him, however, a lot of the times you are going to go for the power-up Stretchy Arms. So Stretchy Arms, basically you gain 10% attack speed, and then on takedown you gain 1 attack range. So this will eventually make Viego into a pseudo backline unit where he can easily just snipe different enemies without having to rush or move from where he's positioned. So a big synergy that you want is usually Stretchy Arms on the Viego. However, a lot of times he still walks up for the first attack, but then after that he kind of stays still. He gains infinite range, and then he just kind of cleans up and deletes the whole board. When you're playing this comp, however, I would say it's pretty average from a spot like this that I'm showing you. The real reason that this comp is extremely strong is if you get Ornn artifacts. So specifically with Viego, you love to get the ranged artifacts. I've talked about this quite a bit, but stuff like RFC as well as snipers, these are extremely good. Fishbone's a little bit like awkward because like it's hard for him to like do the damage well, but even Fishbones can work out. It's just because it got nerfed, it's not as good. But a lot of things like RFC, where it just gives you 1 range then increases, and things like snipers where you get 2 range, it allows your Viego to be so much safer because he doesn't have to walk up. Right, he doesn't have to walk up initially, be in the front line, and then start doing his whole bullshit where he starts to gain range. Instead, you can put him in a safe spot. You can have your tanks actually tank, and then Viego could just like snipe from a distance and then slowly gain up the attack speed and be more like a backline unit. This is what makes the Viego comp significantly better. So playing it from Ornn artifacts is going to be a go-to. You can still play it without Ornn artifacts, then you really need Stretchy Arms. With the Ornn artifacts, especially if you have RFC, you don't really need Stretchy Arms, and that's part of what makes it really great, because you can basically just run RFC, he gains the extra range anyways, you don't run Stretchy Arms, you can give him some other power-ups that just give him more damage or makes him a little bit stronger, and it also works out really well. The Ornn artifacts giving him this range also makes it that a lot of times you don't have to build stuff like Edge of Night or survivability. Because Viego, like as you can see, he's like in a little bit of a weird spot that he does an insane amount of damage and he can be really powerful, but it's very glass cannon-y. Because as you see, like you really want the ramping attack speed, you really want him to have like a lot of attack speed, you really want him to have like the extra damage and the crit. But then you need some sort of survivability, because a lot of times he just walks in the front line, and if he doesn't have some sort of de-aggroing, he'll just die. He also doesn't have Omnivamp with this base kit because he doesn't have built-in Omnivamp anymore, right? Fighters no longer have Omnivamp, they just have attack speed. So he's still very glassy. That's why the Ornn artifacts help a lot, because it allows you to focus on making more damage items without having to be in such an awkward situation. Additionally, with the power-up fruits, there's also Trickster, which works really well with Viego. You might have to change your build a little bit, but this is also really good in the early game. Basically what happens is if you drop to low health, you basically just spawn a dummy and then you dash to the furthest enemy. This works really well with Viego as well, because you basically just like instantly like teleport to the backline unit, delete them, and you can instantly like scale or win a fight that way. But like I said, a lot of times you can also play this from a soul fighter spot. You can just gather the Viegos on level 8, because a lot of times you're stuck on level 8 just rolling, making sure that you have your set 2 and your Samira 2. But until then, you can sometimes go for Jinzhao 3 and Lux 3. If you're rolling on level 7, you have a good rolling augment. But in general, pretty good. Even without the artifacts, still playable, but with the artifacts, it actually becomes pretty good. Make sure your spot's good if you don't have the artifacts is what I would recommend. Next, this one's an oldie goldie, but this is the Protector crew with Jhin. So this is basically a Jhin reroll, but you first treat it as a crew reroll. On my channel, I went on a very in-depth guide on this comp when I was talking about how to play Wraith. There's also time markers on this, which is like a luxury. I don't have the time to put on every single one of my videos, but I put in the effort to put on this video, so you can check it out there as well, and I go into much more depth about it. But long story short, you're rolling for Malphite 3, you're rolling for Sivir 3, usually at low level to make sure that you get your crew bonuses active. While you have the crew bonus, then you can just roll. While you roll, you'll be able to gain EXP, which works really well to just like 3-star everything. You can even go for 3-star of the cheap units because they're not that very expensive. They're not expensive at all, excuse me. But a lot of times you're just going for Jhin 3-star. Jhin 3-star is the main carry. It's just that you roll at low level, get the crew bonus active, and then you just roll with the crew bonus so that it pushes your levels as you're rolling, and you just don't pump EXP until you hit Jhin 3, and then you can just cap out your board with some of the higher cap units. I forgot a unit on the board, Jinx as well. But basically you just play you play snipers with Jhin. Works really well. Malphite early does a lot of damage if you give him armor items, so armor items can work out really well. Bramble Vest Augment, for example, that gives you the Bramble Vest, thorn plated armor, really great. But in general, prioritizing chainmail items on Malphite will help you a lot in the early game, but usually you'll build something that's like kind of like this, some durability, some healing, some magic resist, some armor. Just make him super tanky because he's going to be your main tank in most of the cases. Obviously, if you get to Cassante 2, he can work out as a great secondary tank. In terms of items, you're usually prioritizing Jhin items. Jhin items are very flexible because there's lots of different builds that can work with him. Typically, you like to have base AD. He already has a lot of built-in damage amp from Sniper, but base AD works really well. In his kit, he has locked attack speed. It's kind of a meme to put like Guinsoo or like scaling attack speed on him. It's not that useful. Even though it converts to AD, you're better off just putting an AD item on him. And his max damage, like his 4th attack, basically is like kind of like always a crit, so it always just does like an insane amount of damage. So it kind of works as like the auto attacks does a lot of damage, chunks, and then last attack does a big surge. In terms of other items, you can often just go with more sword items. Giant Slayer, really good into a lot of comps right now because it got buffed recently. But as well, you could just build to more like crit and or sword items. They all work. I go into this a lot more in depth. Even IE, it's like okay on him, but he crits anyways because most of his damage is auto attack. So the auto attacks crit, so you don't need IE. You can just build glove items to make it more consistent. But a lot of these things work out. Just try and get some AD items, just not necessarily attack speed items. Like pretty much everything but Kraken's Guinsoo, you can find a build that can work with him. When you're thinking about power-ups for this, Malphite has not that many good power-ups, to be honest. So actually, I've seen a lot of people actually go Atomic on Malphite. Because like besides having like a scaling max vitality or something that scales the Malphite early, Atomic actually works pretty well. Standalone's a little bit but it's also okay. But Atomic is becoming a lot more popular. This actually does a good amount of damage, and combined with the Jhin, it can actually clutch up a lot of the fights, because Jhin, especially with his overkill, if you get the overkill one, Artistic KO, Atomic can really clutch up and just like delete some backline units without having to deal with anything. For Jhin, there's two schools of thoughts. Artistic KO, basically the 4th attack does more damage, and then overkill bounces. This makes it like really good in terms of just like not having any wasted damage with Jhin. So you can just chunk, and then if you overkill, it basically does damage to the next unit and makes it really nice and efficient. This is one of the more popular ones. The other one is Spirit Sword. Spirit Sword, you basically gain critical strike chance, and then the critical strikes do bonus magic damage. The way I would look at it, I think Spirit Sword's a little bit better now, because Jhin got a nerf, but his only nerf was to 4th shot damage. So I think Spirit Sword, if you're trying to debate, is probably a little bit better. But either one that you see is fine. Usually the breaker point is if you have crit items. So if you're making a lot of glove items for Jhin, or if you're making IE, that type of stuff, I would go Spirit Sword. If you don't have crit items, then I would go Artistic KO, because the crit doesn't work well with the Artistic KO power up. So it's that's how I would pick between the two. But no matter which one you see, you just take one of them, right? The fruits are too hard to get working a lot of the times. You don't pass up on either. It's either Artistic KO or Spirit Sword, and whichever one you see is the one you take. If you have to choose, choose based on items. Like I said, I go into it much more in depth in this guide. Just look up how to play Wraith. There's a little search feature on YouTube. You can just go on my channel, search Wraith, it'll pop up. You can get a fully detailed guide on it there. But yeah, and then max cap, you can play Jinx. Jinx can get other items, so if you're making like attack speed items early game to put on Civ or Gnar, Jinx can take them later. And you can also, if in really high roll spots, cap out really high, itemize on the Varus as well. Next, for our third reroll that I want to show, I would say Heavyweight Darius is pretty good. Basically, Heavyweight Darius was already good last patch, or before B patch, and B patch just nerfed a lot of the 2-cost rerolls. It also nerfed Jhin, but I think Jhin was the one that got the least the least amount of nerfs, because only to his 4th shot damage, so all his other damage is still fine, and the rest of the comp remained pretty similar. But this comp really didn't get any nerfs. Basically, you can play 6 Heavyweight, you play Darius, usually build Darius with crit. The reason is that Heavyweight gives him a lot of AD, because there's the conversion of AD to, from HP to AD. And then additionally, you can usually play some form of, what's it called? I didn't put it in here. Some form of Supreme Cell, and then he gets an Execute, and he gets damage amp from Supreme Cell. So all of that works really nicely, and he becomes a really good carry in those situations. When you go for Darius 3, a lot of times you go for Jayce 3 as well. Jayce, in terms of items, you're just trying to put sword items on the Jayce, and the main reason is that there is another specific power up that makes this comp work well, and that is Fusion Dance. Basically, with Fusion Dance, you fuse with the nearest ally, getting 45% of their health, attack damage, and ability power. So with a unit that scales really well off health and attack damage and converts health into attack damage, you basically get Fusion Dance on the Darius, and you make him suck up a Jayce 3. Jayce also has an insane amount of base AD. He's just a really, really strong unit, being an attack fighter. So basically, you go for Jayce 3, Darius 3, and then you eat the Jayce with the Darius, and then the Darius becomes an absolute monster. In terms of your backline, typically with this line before, you would play it with Malzahar, and Malzahar used to be really strong. Malzahar got some nerfs, both in that he cannot get Shadow Clone anymore, which was one of his best fruits, and then also got a little damage nerf across the board. Malzahar's a lot less capable, I would say, as a solo carry. So typically when you're playing the heavyweight line, you're more playing it from a Darius spot with good Darius items. But Malzahar can still fit in as a backline unit, because if you're rolling for 3 costs on level 7, you can fit in the Malzahar. Additionally, in early Smolder, you can also play Smolder in your backline, but typically you need to fit in a Supreme Cell at one point, so you're going to try and get Supreme Cell to activate the Darius. In terms of items, you want to build them with crit, as I was saying. Last item, I left it open. There's lots of different options. For survivability, you can go like an Edge of Night, but a lot of times he's going to be tanky enough, especially if you have Fusion Dance, with all the extra HP. So instead, you just want to try and burst down the opponents. Giant Slayer works really well. He's really good at tank busting, because he also has his own tank busting ability. So you can go full crit, and something like Giant Slayer, give him even more damage, or like some other crit item as well could work out fine. Now, there are some reroll comps we obviously left out. I tried to pick 3 of the ones that I think are better or more consistent, especially with the changes and what I've been seeing on the current patch, both through gameplay and stats. There are lots of comps that are still good. I think that a lot of the rerolls that got nerfed, if you have a good spot for it, they're still fine. Obviously, Kayle didn't really get any nerfs, and she's going to be really strong. It's just a comp that you need a really good spot for. Kayle, usually you have to not only hit the Kayle 3-star, you have to have good items for the Kayle, and you have to be able to make it to level 9. There's a lot of criteria in order for that to convert into a top 4. So it's very like feast or famine, first or 8th. So just make sure you have a good kale spot. Mundo Hero Augment, I put the Gwynsuyer just to symbolize it, is still really good. I might make a separate Mundo Hero Augment guide, but basically just play all the Juggernauts. Mundo Hero, you put Gwynsu IE +1, you want crit and attack speed, and then in terms of power-ups, he can actually still get max vitality. So you go always max vitality on him. Max vitality gives him permanent HP, and if he survives, he gains more HP. Even though he's the hero augment, so he's in the backline, he's shooting like damage items, he still scales off HP. Like his damage while he's in hero form still scales off HP. So this actually works like an insane scaling for him for late game. So that's like a really good synergy you can do there. Xayah, I think from spots, even though her whole comp got like absolutely nerfed and gutted, I think she can still be good with tiny team. I think you just don't play her with fan service anymore. You typically play her more with like edgelords right now, but I think she's a little bit more spot specific. And then obviously if you have a good spot for Smolder, maybe Smolder can be good. Other rerolls also depends on the spot. I don't know about the Mentor Kaisa lines right now, or sorry, the mentor I think it got removed, right? Yeah, never mind. They didn't bug fix it yet. I was gonna say these lines are bugged, but I think yesterday's patch notes, they got removed, so you don't have to worry about those lines. Obviously there's some other lines we'll talk about after, like Drift Duo. I'll mention it in the 4 cost comps because I'm going to talk a little bit about Mighty Mech over there. But anyways, let's get into some of the 4 cost comps. So in rerolls, I gave you like 3 kind of like 4-ish that are pretty good. In terms of 4 costs, one of the ones that got a big buff was actually Ashe. So Ashe now I think is a lot better and a lot more reliable to play around. This was a comp that used to be really broken, then it kind of fell off, and now it's a little bit better. Basically, you're playing around Ashe with Udyr. You're only playing 7 units on your board because you always go for Colossal on Udyr. Colossal is a power-up, which Colossal is a power-up where the unit takes up 2 slots, and then they just get giga juiced in terms of like extra HP, durability, and damage amp. It works really well with the Udyr, because the Udyr basically has really good scaling with both attack speed from Duelist as well as like AP AD. So if you give him like the other stats, he basically becomes a demon that's unkillable. In terms of items, a lot of times on Udyr you usually went Sterix and Titans, and then you had 1 extra item that you would basically try and play around. Both of these work really well because you can have a lot of HP, so Sterix works well, and then Titans gives him some armor, gives him CC immunity, and also gives him stacking AP and AD, from which he scales really well on. He has a AP and AD scaling in his kit. After that, you usually just build a tank item. Usually it's Gargoyle just to give him some more armor because he already has so much HP. In terms of Ashe, you're usually going Gwynsu Kraken. It's always a good option. She has scaling off of attack speed, which is really nice. So attack speed is never really wasted, especially with the Duelist trait. And then also the Kraken gives her a good chunk of AD. Even though they changed Kraken that it doesn't get extra stacks, that kind of hurt her in the past, but now she got some base AD changes, so she still hits like a truck. Last item is very flexible. You can go for Gunblade, make her kind of sustain the front line. You can also go for Edge of Night, just make sure that she doesn't get sniped, and also give her some decent stats, because like the big thing with Ashe is that she's really good at clutching up, and she'll always outscale and delete everybody and melt everybody at one point. So as long as she survives, you'll be in a good spot. In order to cap out this board, you can obviously put in Lee Sin as a Duelist. You can also play with a TF if you have Duelist Emblem. TF is absolutely broken and absurd. You can even play Zyra in some cases and just have an extra backline unit. A lot of times you might play Lee Sin with Colossal, and then you just have Colossal Udyr, Colossal Lee Sin, and you have 2 Colossals, which is absolutely absurd. But in general, when you're playing the Ashe, power-ups are they're plentiful. A lot of times you'll see something like Shadow Clone, just because it works really nicely, especially if you have the Edge of Night, because the second copy is going to scale and do a lot of damage into the fight as well, so it can work out really nicely. But even stuff like Sky Piercer or Bludgeoner, like anything that just like makes her bypass armor, do extra damage, is also fine. She's pretty flexible in that regard. You don't have to like dig super deep. It's just whatever really fits with your current setup and your current board is usually what's going to end up being pretty good. With the Ashe buffs, I've also seen some people playing this previous version of the board where you're playing 6 Juggernaut Ashe instead. So this board I think is going to be weaker than the Colossal one, but it's hard to say right now because it's still very early in the patch. But this is another option where you're just playing 6 Juggernauts or like a really strong vertical front line, and then just having the Ashe in the back line. This requires the Ashe to scale a little bit faster. With this one, with 6 Duelist and the Colossal Udyr, the Ashe basically gets to a point where she's pumping out damage and melting enemies a lot faster. This one takes a little bit more time, and you're hoping that by investing more into the front line, you're going to be in a better spot to kind of like outscale. The thing with this board though is that it's more flexible. If you're playing this from like a tempo spot where you're trying to like get to level 9, this variation allows you to have a lot more flexibility on like changing your backline and playing around some of the other units. For example, if you can fast 9 with this, you can play around Twisted Fate or even Varus and have like a strong vertical front line, maybe drop 2 Juggernauts later in the game, 2 Juggernauts later in the game, and then play like more 5 costs. This one's a little bit more flexible. This one, it's like if you start dropping Duelists, the Ashe just doesn't function, the Udyr doesn't function. So this one's a lot more rigid, but probably a lot more stable and consistent. This one is a little bit more awkward, but has a higher cap in some cases because you can swap out the Juggernauts and start playing legendaries at late game because you're not relying on the Duelist for the Ashe in this case. Next, another comp I want to talk about was Soul Fighter. So Soul Fighter, I think you really want to play from ahead. I don't think Soul Fighter is consistent and strong in the sense of just being like a reliable 4-cost comp you can play around. And I know some people will disagree with me, but in my experience in Soul Fighter, you really want to be from a spot where you can easily hit the Samira set and then still be able to make it to 8 Soul Fighter. Sorry, here I only have 7 Soul Fighter. I'm missing a Callista. Right, but usually 8 Soul Fighter, it gives so many stats and so much bonus abilities, so much bonus HP that you're almost always going to play 8 Soul Fighter over anything until you have 8 Soul Fighter, or if you make it to level 9, then you can fit in Edgelord. If you have an emblem, Soul Fighter emblem on Volibear is extremely strong. But typically you're going to be playing around Samira. Samira, a lot of times you want to build her with crit, as well as like some mana gen, because it works out really nicely. She has a passive where she's every cast she gains like these extra style points, and then eventually she does like her Giga ult when she reaches like max style. So having a Shojin really helps her to like scale that up. And then in terms of last item, a lot of times you can complete the build with like another crit glove item like a Striker's, gives her damage amp and scales the crit, or you can just give her some more damage amp. Giant Slayer is pretty good of an item right now in the current game. When you're thinking about Soul Fighter, because you have so many base stats and you do true damage, that's why you want to scale her with damage amp crit. I think that this comp is extremely reliant on a particular power-up. Again, I know this is something that I keep saying, but it's kind of the way that the set kind of progressed, is that a lot of times certain comps only work with certain power-ups. With Samira, you specifically want on the edge, I believe. Yes, this one. This one really puts the Samira out like in a separate tier. If you have, like, obviously you can build other stuff on Samira. You can go Shadow Clone, you can go, like, Bludgeoner or Sky Piercer, like, other stuff that, like, you know, you would typically put on, like, backline AD carries, like, the more flexible ones. This one, it's a noticeable increase in the amount of damage that she does. Basically, you start the combat at lower HP, but then you gain damage amp. Now, the lower HP doesn't really matter with her. It might matter in some matchups, like if you're playing against, like, a Fishbones, for example, that might be a problem. But if you're playing in a normal game, where there's not like really crazy backline, or you're not going to get sniped randomly, with her passive she gains Omnivam. So as she casts, she's going to gain a bunch of Omnivam. She's going to heal back to full by the time she jumps in, right? Because like a big scare is that she has low HP and then she's going to jump in and int and die. But she's going to be back to full in most cases because she's just going to do more damage. And that with that extra damage that you do, she's going to heal more anyways. With those builds, you can also go for Gunblade if you're really stressed. That's more so if like there's backline access with some of the enemies. Like let's say somebody has like a Sniper Caitlyn, or I don't know, like a Yasuo that can jump the back line, or Fishbones like I was saying, then Hextech could work out pretty well just to like make sure that you're okay. Additionally, Nashers could work out similarly as mana gen, maybe in place of Shojin in some cases. But with On the Edge, you're basically taking a bunch of base stats you get from Soul Fighter, you're taking a bunch of crit that you're building with your IE build, and then you're scaling that with an insane amount of extra damage amp. It actually is like a noticeably massive amount of extra damage that the Samira does. Like On the Edge versus not On the Edge, you really notice a difference in the Samira pumping out. So this one is pretty important for the comp. And I think it's something that's a little bit overlooked. But this, if you're not having some trouble with Soul Fighter or not having it consistently do well when you play it, this one's one of the reasons it's very important for the comp. And then obviously on set, you can just pick whatever tank stuff, or you can even Fruit Volibear or Gwen if you upgrade them and have items for them. A lot of times you're going for Gwen items later, and she can hold like a lot of the utility items like Anti-Heal or Shred Sunder, mostly Shred. And then she obviously has like stuff like Needlework and other things that work nicely for her. With this comp, you can also roll for Viego 3-star. You can kind of marry the idea of this comp with the Reroll Viego comp. But usually that just comes from you naturaling or finding a bunch of Viegos, because you really want to, if you're prioritizing Viego items, go for Viego on 7. If you're prioritizing Samira items, go for Samira on level 8 in order to make it more consistent and fine. Next, this was a comp that I kind of started to mention. I see it being a little bit more popular, and I want to talk about it and break it down a little bit. This is the Jinx kind of carry comps. There's a couple of them that are kind of popular right now. There's two different variations. Basically, there's this augment that got recently nerfed. It's called Tiny Team. When you field 3 or less Star Guardians, increase their bonus. Here it still says 200%. It's now 150%. The tooltip just wasn't updated on this website. So this got nerfed from 200 to 150. This augment with 150% bonuses is still broken. It's still extremely strong. I don't think it's like a hard force kind of strong. Like you see it, you instantly click it. That's how it was on the previous patch. But it's still extremely strong. Just keep it in mind. And with that, you can play boards like this. Basically, you play only 3 Star Guardians. The Xayah and the Jinx bonuses are insane for Star Guardian, especially with Tiny Team, because Xayah makes magic damage on attack and Jinx gives attack speed. So basically, your Jinx just pumps out an insane amount of magic damage because of the Xayah passive, and then the Jinx just having an insane amount of attack speed. Because you have so much attack speed when you're playing Tiny Team in particular, something like Kraken's works really well, scale it up. And then other damage items, Giant Slayer is really good, and obviously crit. Jinx has really good scaling with crit, by the way, because crits give her extra attack speed. So that's really nice. But typically crit just make her ult do a bunch of damage, and then she has damage amp from sniper, so you kind of like scale everything up really nicely. You don't need to make a Guinsoo on Jinx, excuse me. It's not that essential. It's kind of like whatever. Especially in these builds, when you have a lot of attack speed, especially from Tiny Team, you really don't need it. So you'd rather just put 3 damage items and make her pop off. In terms of your frontline, Poppy, especially with Tiny Team, is going to be tanky enough, because Poppy's Star Guardian bonus is going to be that she gets this heal, and it's going to be an even bigger heal, so she's basically just going to be like second least at life, really hard to kill. Cassante as well, literally has a second least at life and is hard to kill. And then you can play Kabuko for Mentor bonus. Here I just threw in Braum because he's a decent frontline, but you can play a Protector as well, just not Nico, because you want to have these 3 as your Tiny Team. And then obviously scaling with scaling with your snipers, and then Varus being an extremely powerful late game unit that you can then build towards, gives you really high cap potential. So what do you do if you don't have Tiny Team, however? Some variations, there's lots of different versions, but Jinx right now is pretty good. She's a pretty reliable and strong damage dealer, so you can do a similar build. If you don't have Tiny Team, you could play deeper into Star Guardian. A full Star Guardian board isn't super necessary, but this is more of like a fast 9 kind of Jinx board. I wouldn't necessarily play this from behind. I would play this if I have a lot of HP and a lot of gold, because you can cap really high. Basically, you're playing this kind of like a Wraith Varus board, but you're dual carrying Jinx with Varus. So it's kind of like similar to like the Fast 9 Varus boards, but there's a little bit of stabilization you can have on level 8, because obviously you can just play the weaker counterparts, right? To complete the board, you can play Syndra and you can play Jhin, and you'll still have the same synergies. However, in order for this comp to do well and in order to perform properly, you really want to make it to level 9, get into like this deep Star Guardian Wraith kind of board. On the side, I put Nico and Rel. Based on who you hit as your front line, you could play either of these to kind of tie the board together. So obviously you can play Nico if you're playing Cassante with tank items, or if you hit a Braum early, you can play Rel and just get Bastion activated. So this is a board similar to this one. This one specifically, Tiny Team, is what makes it really strong. With Tiny Team, this is like one of the strongest boards in the game, so I had to talk about it here. Like, I have to tell you guys about it. But without Tiny Team, it's very risky, and I would definitely play it from having like a huge econ lead, right? Like if I'm really rich, or if I have like, you know, really rich Jinx items, AD, and I'm looking for something to play, or if I'm like fast 9ing, this is like an option of a fast 9 board that doesn't use as many 5 costs. as like the Varus board, so it's like a little bit lower cap, but stabilizes a lot more easily around the Jinx, and can also stabilize on level 8. I wanted to make out 2 more shoutouts here. We're going to talk about Karma quite a bit and Mech. But Ryze right now, I think, is a little bit worse for wear. Ryze used to be really dependent on Socialite, and he was very dominant on the last patch. I think with the removal of the Socialite power-up, the Mentor Ryze board, to me, is very inconsistent. Obviously, if you hit everything and you high roll and you get all of your upgrades, it's still playable. Like most things in TFT, there's always going to be fringe cases, like similar to Reroll and similar to like all 4 costs. He'll still be like having some play, but it's not something that I would structure my game plan around. If I have like, you know, an opener, I wouldn't say, oh, I want to play Ryze this game. I would consider some of the other lines first and kind of lean myself more towards those ideas. When you were thinking about this, however, Karma got a little bit of a mana buff, but she's actually pretty strong right now, and I'm not sure if it's just because of like people figuring out the patch or not, so I wasn't sure where to include it, but I'll talk a little bit about Karma right now. So obviously Karma used to be very playable with the Sork line. Basically you would just play all the Sork units, and then you would play some rendition of these units, right? You would play Sork with Mighty Mech. A lot of times you would drop the Ahri eventually, and then you would play 6 Sork, Mighty Mech, and then you can even cap out around Braum. And depending on what your front line you would hit, you would play either Cassante, often you would play Jarvan for the stun, Swain, and then you would also fit in the Braum eventually. This board is doing okay right now. It's pretty alright. I'm not sure how strong it is. I think with really good Karma items, this board could pop off. The main thing that this board requires when you play Sorks is getting a kill. So it really comes down to what other people are playing. That's why it's hard to gauge how strong it is. So Karma now pumps out damage a little bit more consistently. When you're making Karma items, you're usually making some sort of mana gen, either Shojin or blue buff, but usually it's Shojin just for item economy standpoint, right? Like if you're using your tiers for blue buff, then what do you do with the sword and what do you do with the other items, right? It's easier just to make Shojin than use the tier for like a void staff or something else, or a frontline item, because you need tiers. And then usually build her with crit. Even like Nashers can sometimes work in place of strikers. Both are fine. But basically you have a bunch of AP from sorcerer trait, so then you want to scale that with crit and damage amp so that she hits like a truck. The problem is like I was saying with Sorks, if you're going against boards where it's hard to kill the unit, then you're not getting your Sork procs early, and the comp can fall apart really fast. Obviously Gwen helps with this because she kind of cleans up all the low HP units and can kind of get those Sork procs going. But that's the big problem with this comp. So last patch, it was abysmal to play Karma because all the reroll units, you couldn't kill the frontline units in time, and the Karma would suffer. Similarly, if the Karma can't get the kill on some of the the current tank units in this current state of the game, if people are playing like, you know, Soul Fighter or what's it called, this board, or even the heavyweight board, this comp has the potential to just fizzle out and not be able to stabilize on level 8. Obviously, if you can make it to level 9 and you have a Gwen 2, Braum 2, this board will obviously win, but that's how it was in the past. It's just a matter of the journey getting there that is sometimes a little bit awkward. The other thing that people are playing a lot with Karma is around Mighty Mech. Now, I might make a separate Mighty Mech guide because I think it's a little bit more involved, but basically this is more of like a fast 9 setup. If you can make it to 7 Mighty Mech, this mech is actually so hard to kill and does so much damage only with 7 Mighty Mech though. If you're 5 Mighty Mech, right? If you're 5, if you're not 7 Mighty Mech, the comp fucking blows. It's so bad, it is not worth playing around. So specifically, you're trying to get 7 Mighty Mech, and that's impossible because to do unless you hit a Yone, because there's no way to get an emblem and it's very difficult. So you want to hit 7 Mighty Mech. If you can play 7 Mighty Mech, then the Karma is usually going to be great because you get Sorkin for free, and this mech is going to be so tanky that you're going to stall enough that the Karma will be able to do the damage. So it's totally fine. And then between the Yone and the other units on your board and Senna, sometimes you can even go for Senna 3, this board will be extremely powerful and extremely stable, as well as extremely strong. So this is a very viable option, but it feels more like a fast 9 or high roll option because you need to hit a Yone. If you don't hit a Yone, you are losing every round. You know what I mean? You need a Yone. You need one of them. If you don't see a singular Yone, it's very hard to play around this. So it's hard to gauge how strong Karma is because because like if you're aiming for karma, you need like, you know, the Sork board is a little bit temperamental, and then this board is a little bit awkward. So the remedy for this, however, is if you play Reroll, which is a completely separate comp. But basically there is a new power-up. It used to be bugged, but now it's a lot better, because they got rid of the bug apparently. Is what's it called? Drift Duo. So Drift Duo, you actually play around Senna, Lucian, Reroll. So this is a separate reroll line that you can play, where you go for Lucian 3 and Senna. Lucian can hold similar items to Karma, but you're also stalling out with 7 Mighty Mech. So sometimes even Lucian with Archangels works well, but the items are a little bit like temperamental. We're not entirely sure what the best is. So you can build like similar to Karma items, just a lot of crit because you're playing around the Lucian 3 with Sork. But you can also give him like, you know, some sort of like giga damage. Also, because he has mana refund if he misses and he has a low mana threshold, I've seen people do like full damage with an Archangels and just have him like pop off, or like damage like this where he gains some mana via attacking, like Nashers. This might be like Lucian Biss, I'm not sure, because I haven't tried it out because it was bugged last patch, so I didn't play it last patch, and I haven't had a spot for it on this patch, so I'll be honest. So I can't tell you from personal experience, but I've seen both builds kind of work. A lot of the time, you're just trying to make sure that you can tempo, because you want it Lucian 3, and then you want it Senna 3. So a lot of times you're rolling at low level for Lucian 3, Aatrox 3, so you're rolling at like level 5, stabilize your mid game, then you got to make it to level 7 to roll for Senna. If you go to level 7 and you try and find Lucian on level 7, you're putting a big risk on yourself because you might not be able to find the Lucian. So this comp is a little bit awkward. So you really want to play it from like a high roll Lucian opener. You want to see like a lot of Lucians, or maybe worth the weight Lucian, something like that, to make sure that you're able to make it so you can also roll for the Senna. And then Senna, typically you can build it with like crit and AD. So you usually fit an Executioner, but it's low Executioner, so IE is still fine, and you might not hit the rise for a while. But you could just build her like with base AD if that's the case. You usually want some sort of Shojin on her, because you need her to do some, you need her to get her cast off. The thing that makes this great, however, is that if you make it to 3-star Lucian and 3-star Senna with Drift Duo, you get +1 Mighty Mech. So now you don't need to find the Yone. And then once you get +1 Mighty Mech, this Mighty Mech becomes insane because he's 7 Mighty Mech, and you have 3 stars, which scale him further. So at this point, if you 3-star all of these units, if you have like some prismatic ticket, you can even for fun 3-star the Gangplank just to power up the mech. At that point, the mech becomes such a potent tank and carry for your team that the comp actually pops off and does really well. So a lot of times when you see the stats on like right now, there's like some stats that say Karma is really good. This is what I mean by we need to see how it plays out in the patch. It's so hard to tell on a day 1 or a day 2, or even maybe in a week from now, because like a lot of the times when you see like this unit pop off and have good items, a lot of times it's surrounding this 7 Mighty Mech situation, which is either achievable through a really good spot where you can 3-star both of these units, or a really good spot where you're hitting a Yone, right? So, you know, that's what I mean. It's a little bit awkward, but of course, be careful. Also, if you look at the stats as well, Rise looks really good on the patch, but it's only with 7 Mighty Mech, so that's another little funny part as well. But Rise fits in really nicely because Strategist, Mentor bonus, and Executioner fits in with this team really well. So usually add in Rise as the +1. But anyways, I did want to talk about Karma a little bit and talk about this board. I'll keep you guys posted. Like I said, I might make a separate Mighty Mech guide, or a how to play Mighty Mech guide, that will go over all the Mighty Mech lines. That might make it a little bit clearer, especially if it's like become something that's really potent on the current patch. But in terms of the forecast comps, I think the other lines are the ones that I see a little bit more, see as being a little bit more popular to angle or to play around. But anyways, thanks for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. I tried to upload this earlier than my normal time, so it's like a couple hours earlier, just because yesterday I was supposed to do the best comps, but then there was the B patch, so it took me a little bit of time to figure everything out. I didn't want to like clickbait you guys yesterday. I wanted to like try and figure it out to make it as accurate as I could be. But anyways, thanks for watching. Have a great day, and see ya. Bye-bye.